I'm going to have to read today because my main job is going to be to facilitate this one. So I'm going to have my old person's glasses at the tip of my nose, but I'm not here to tell you a story. I'm just here to ask questions and maybe provide some answers here and there. You ready to go? Excellent.
I'm ready.
Yes. And you're on the screen, just so you know.
Yes, good.
So, don't surf things that, anyway. So I'm Martin Dinel. I'm Chief Information Security Officer for the Government of Alberta, Assistant Deputy Minister for the Cybersecurity Division. And with me today, we're very lucky to have Dan Woods, who's the Global Head of Bot and Risk Management at F5. Prior to that, Dan spent more than 20 years with local, state, and federal law enforcement and intelligence organizations in the United States. So maybe to start with, could you tell us a little bit more about your career, yourself essentially, and your role at F5? So I understand, for instance, that you started your cybersecurity career in law enforcement with a few interesting agencies with three-letter names, and so I'm interested in finding out a little bit more about that.
Yeah. I spent some time at FBI as a special agent assigned to cyber terrorism, and also time at CIA as a cyber operations officer. Both of those were great jobs, working with great people, great mission, very rewarding. But most people are drawn to that experience. But what really changed my life is in the early '90s. I was a police officer, just a beat cop. Going from call to call to call, handling domestic violence and burglary calls and gang calls and shootings, and that really taught me the importance of an education. So that really opened my eyes, and it's when I first wanted to start studying computer crime.
Excellent. And you ended up eventually with F5, obviously. How did you end up in that organization, moving out of law enforcement?
When I left the government, I joined a startup in Silicon Valley called Cybersecurity, and Cybersecurity was subsequently purchased by F5, and through that acquisition, they purchased me. And I didn't expect to be working for F5 for very long, frankly. I'm used to a small, agile startup, with really moving fast to solve problems. And when F5 acquired us, I thought, oh no, here we go. But now it's been about 4 years, 3.5, 4 years, and I'm still here because I absolutely love what they're doing with the anti-bot technology. They're integrating it into everything that they do and giving like a WAP, a API protection, WAF, everything through one unified platform, and I'm really excited about that.
Excellent, yes. So actually, as a matter of fact, this is how I came to do business with F5 myself. So at the Government of Alberta, back in 2020, of course, with the pandemic occurring, the Government of Alberta Cabinet, as a matter of fact, committed us to government services that would be digital by default. Of course, the first thought that came through my mind is more digital services also means more cyber attacks, potentially a potential for more breaches. So we started to look at the possibility of protecting ourselves from digital fraudulent activities. I had heard of Shape, I had heard of a few other products, as a matter of fact, that could detect through machine learning and artificial intelligence fraudulent activities and alert us in a way that is not too, how would I say, too rough. Not brutally. What I mean by that is you can implement threshold that actually kind of, you get alerted for certain things and you get alerted really with very significant alerts for other things. And that was essentially the product we were looking at. So in 2021, I had talked to F5 and we were going to bring them into people who are familiar with it, My Alberta Digital ID, which we're now referring to as Alberta Accounts. We're changing the name right now. Some people were a little bit afraid of the term digital ID. The same people. Have I ever told you about the COVID vaccine? It actually contained little devices. We can now track you down. Yeah. Anyway, I see you're not very worried about it. That's good. So, but we have some people that sometimes get worried about digital IDs because they think government is there to track them. This is not what we're trying to do. We're trying to make things better for people. But in November 2022 is when we finally were able to run an actual pilot project with F5 and Shape. And as I mentioned, it was a pilot project. We just put it in front of Maddie and we were looking at what we could see. Within a month, we actually identified a significant campaign that was being conducted against our student finance system. And while I'm not going to mention numbers in terms of how much money we ended up saving in fraudulent activities that were blocked to the Government of Alberta, what I can tell you that it was more than enough to pay for 3 years of subscription of the product.
What I'm hearing is we need to charge more.
Yeah. No, you just blocked a lot of significant attacks is what I'm trying to say. So, but, and it's just been getting better since you've seen the affordability program being delivered in January and many other products recently, of course, something with E. coli and the event that happened in Calgary. So this system now fronts most of our system, and it's been definitely a very successful way of improving our system. So my point, though, with that is that like many other organizations, many organizations believe tight monitoring, if I have a whole slew of tools and things like that, and if I use things like multi-factor authentication and CAPTCHA and such, that's enough to protect my systems when I'm going to do business digitally. Well, it's not quite the case, is it?
No, it is not.
Essentially, I've heard that you have quite a bit of experience with specific digital technologies like essentially solving CAPTCHA. Can you expand on this experience and give us a bit of advice regarding how reliable things like CAPTCHA are?
Yes, I'd be happy to. And this is best done using some visuals, which is why I'm broadcasting. If you look at Google's own online demo of reCAPTCHA, and you look under the hood, you see a text area ID called gReCAPTCHA response, and its display attribute is set to none. If you look right there where that red arrow is flashing, you'll see there's no text box. But as soon as you change the display attribute to inline or delete it altogether, you have a text box that appears where that red arrow is. Then if you check the box, there's an API call out to Google, looks at whatever signals it looks at to determine if you're a human or a bot. If it thinks you're a bot, it asks you to pick crosswalks out of pictures or other trivial tasks that I find extremely annoying. Eventually, you convince it you are a human and you get a green check mark. You click submit and you get verification success, hooray. So really what you need is a token to go into that box. You don't need to check, I'm not a robot. A lot of third-party companies will provide that token for you. I'm going to go into detail on this one. This is a Russian human click farm. And I went to work for this company for a short period of time, and I'll share that experience as well. The way it works is if a bot hits your site and you serve up a traditional CAPTCHA, it'll send an image of that CAPTCHA to 2CAPTCHA. They'll send it to their humans to solve. And now these are humans. They're going to solve it. They're going to take the most popular answer. And this is why their solve rate is so high. The most popular answer, in this case overlooks, pass it to the bot who submits it to your site, and they're seen as human. reCAPTCHA works a little differently. This time, they'll use the API to tell a human to go to your site and check the box. They are human, so they're going to get the green check mark, and they're going to get a token. They submit that token back to the bot. At this point, the bot does not need to check this box, just needs to submit the token to the site, and they'll be seen as human. All of this can happen through one IP address, so the fact that it's happening is entirely transparent to your organization. This is me going through training mode at the Russian human click farm. I've studied, they've taught me how to solve CAPTCHAs through this very extensive, long manual. You read through it, you get good at solving CAPTCHAs, and then you start solving it. This is training mode. I have to solve the CAPTCHAs in the right amount of time, otherwise I'm not going to be able to proceed to start solving CAPTCHAs for money. But I eventually got through this with the help of my teenage daughters. And now this is me solving CAPTCHAs, earning money. And if you look right up here at the top, you'll see that I had solved, I don't know, I can't read that, 18 CAPTCHAs maybe. I haven't earned 1 penny US yet. It's very exploitative. We wrote a blog about how exploitative it is, and the Russian human click farm, the managers reached out to me through F5 and objected to my characterization that it's exploitative, and they said, if somebody solves CAPTCHAs all day long, 12, 14-hour day, they can earn up to $3 US. And I thought, you're kind of making my point for me. But tragically, $3 US is enough in some regions of the world, for a subsistence kind of living. So they're exploiting these people and having them solve CAPTCHAs all day long for money. And it solves all CAPTCHAs, every one of them. even fun CAPTCHAs where you're supposed to twirl a monkey so this right side up. And there's nothing fun about that. When I encounter that, I just want to take my business somewhere else. And here's me using 2CAPTCHA to check my gift card balance. You see, I never check, I'm not a robot, and I get my gift card balance. Some of you might be wondering, hey, that's your gift card, that's your actual gift card number and PIN. That's all you need to steal it. You're not doing anything to protect it or hide it. You're right, I'm not. So I was wondering, how long will it take for somebody to steal my $25? And I know the answer, it's 2 years. After 2 years, somebody stole my $25. And all I do is talk to a bunch of security experts. So there's a mole among us, and I want my $25 back.
Okay, where's Render, man? Oh.
So that is the reason why CAPTCHA should not be used. It's just a speed bump for bots, and it just creates a lot of friction for your customers.
Excellent, thank you. Another tool, like I remember, again, when we went more digital, one of the key controls I wanted to have in place for Government of Alberta is very nice. We got a verified ID. That means it's verified at the onset when we create the ID for the person. We know you are who you claim to be. Wonderful. About 5 minutes later, we don't know anymore, really. So I wanted to see multi-factor authentication implemented as part of our services. So a lot of people, again, think that MFA is 100% perfect and will prevent things like phishing for credentials from being successful. It certainly makes things harder for hackers, but it doesn't make it 100% protection, 100% effective.
That's true, it doesn't. Some of our telecommunications customers are the most aggressively targeted with bot traffic, credential stuffing, trying to take over subscriber accounts. If they're able to take over some of these accounts, oftentimes there's a portal inside where you can get access to text messages. When there's not a portal, they'll use the PII in the account and fake ID to social engineer a port out or a SIM swap. We had one of our telco customers share with us an experience. They were dealing with an adversary so patient and sophisticated that they waited for the victim to be on a plane so that his phone would be in airplane mode and wouldn't immediately recognize that his phone had stopped working. So think about it. When your phone doesn't work, the first thing you do is you blame your carrier, right? First thing. What you should be thinking is maybe you're the victim of a port out or a swim swap, and you should take that very, very seriously. This is an old article from 2017. I'm not an SS7 expert. That's Signaling System 7. It's a protocol used by many telecommunications companies. I do have friends at CIA who are SS7 experts, so I sent them this article and said, are they overstating it, understating it? What's the situation? And they wrote back quickly, oh, SS7 is extremely vulnerable. It was never developed with security in mind, and there's no doubt in their mind that every state actor, many sophisticated criminal organizations, and some sophisticated individuals have access to the SS7 network. This is a mock-up of my inbox. If you were to take over my email, you'd see where I invest my money, the hotel I stay at, my airline, and my telco. It's reasonable for you to conclude I likely have online accounts at each of those. So they'll set up an email filter forwarder here saying, okay, all emails from Charles Schwab, skip the inbox and go to this Proton Mail account. Then they go through the forgot password workflow. And all those critically important notification emails skip my inbox and go to the fraudster. Taking over the account also gives them access to the 2FA messages that are sent via email. Lots of malware is for sale on the dark web. We've acquired this, we've tested it, it works. Many of it is very favorably reviewed as well. And this has always been a problem, but in the last 4 or 5 years, I'm seeing dozens and dozens of these for sale, getting better and better in their abilities. One thing I found, and which is why my daughters only use iPhone, is I don't find much malware on the dark web for iPhone. I find it a lot for Android. Now, of course, as a security expert, you have good security hygiene. You could use Androids safely, but I would not let my kids use an Android. Here's a telco insider selling access to the SS7 network. It's not cheap. You could see it takes roughly $10,000 US for 2 hours of access to text messages. So this is really used when you have a bunch of accounts, you know the username and password for it, but you can't get past the 2FA. You partner with someone like this, and you'll have access to the 2FA. Social engineering will continue to work, unfortunately. Hey, I used to have your phone number. I'm trying to log into an old account. It's sending me a code. Apparently, it's going to you. Do you mind sending it to me? Sure, no problem. Thank you so much. Here's the code. Yeah, this actually happened. This is more recent, in the last 3 or 4 years, huge uptick in OTP bots. What you're looking at on the screen, I'm sorry it's blurry because it's a screen grab right from the dark web, but that's the attacker's device. You give the OTP bot the name of the bank, the phone number of the bank, the phone number of the target. The OTP bot will call the victim from the bank's phone number and say something like, "Hi, this is the bank calling to verify the purchase of a MacBook Pro. If it was authorized, press 1. If not, press 2. Okay, so far, nothing alarming about that. You press 2. In order for us to cancel it, we're going to send you a code. And at this instant, they're trying to log into the 2FA protected website. That triggers the code. But think about the user's experience. They're trying to cancel this order of a MacBook Pro, and they were told they're going to get a code. And sure enough, they got a code. So the person enters the code. This goes a little further and asks for the PIN. I think a lot of people would start thinking this is a scam asking for the PIN. I probably would have configured this to ask for the OTP. I would have taken it and moved on and called it a success. But this particular one is also asking for the PIN. But hugely successful, very highly rated on the dark web. So this is a serious problem. But here's really the point. Most implementations of 2FA is what you see on the screen. Both of these are the same login application. On the left, I submitted bad credentials, and I was told that didn't work. On the right, I submitted good credentials, and now it's asking me for the channel through which I'd like to receive my code. That tells me if the username and password were correct, right? Now, to Martin's point, it makes account takeover harder, but it doesn't stop credential stuffing. Let's say I have, 10 million username password pairs. I launch the attack against a 2FA protected endpoint, and I leave with 600 username password pairs I know work. And then I partner with a telco insider or somebody who specializes in social engineering or an SS7 compromise, and we monetize those 600 or 700 that work. So this is why 2FA, it certainly plays an important role in security. I'm not saying it should not be used. I'm saying it should be used. But it's not the end-all, be-all. You have to be cognizant that it does not stop credential stuffing.
And that happens all the time. We're seeing some of the attacks coming, as a matter of fact, at this point in time. And it's funny, it's important also to set up 2FA or MFA in the most effective way possible. Too many people go the easy way because their users will be complaining about how hard it is to go on an app and press OK. So they want to just see a simple SMS text that they will reply to. There are ways to get into a man-in-the-middle attack or something like that in there. So please make sure when you set it up, you put all the tools to use as well. So it makes things better, but again, not efficient 100% of the time, that's for sure. So CAPTCHA, MFA, all those tools we put in place to protect our assets are great tools. Somebody will come in and do reconnaissance, detect those tools, find ways to go around, and then our best bet is to have tools where we have people closely monitoring system and reacting to things. I mentioned F5, we get to a threshold, we get an alert, do we terminate that connection, what do we do? But threat actors are smart. So essentially, they realize that we're proactively monitoring their connection, that we're proactively blocking them. So in your experience, can you give us kind of an overview of how hackers react to the fact that their attacks get mitigated or get countered from a hacker's perspective?
And sure, and this is important because if you know exactly how the attackers are going to react, it really helps you to be prepared to deploy the next countermeasure. We found all attackers start with a very unsophisticated attack. In fact, they only use the amount of sophistication necessary to make their attack successful. There's no reason to throw tech or resources or AI at an attack if their unsophisticated attack is successful. So they start using tools like curl or Sentry MBA. They don't really do anything to spoof the browser or spoof a human, aside from maybe forging a couple of user agent strings. If those attacks are mitigated, the first thing they do is manipulate their attack infrastructure. They start coming from more IPs, different autonomous systems, different regions of the world. They even start coming from residential IPs versus hosted IPs. With F5, none of this works. We don't mitigate by any of those attributes. And the next thing thing we see them do is start using headless browsers or Seculi or Selenium, where they are taking programmatic control of an actual browser. By the way, the curl and CentryMBA are very easy to defeat. A simple JavaScript challenge will defeat those. But they'll quickly retool and use a headless browser, so they are now executing that JavaScript. In the beginning, they're not very good at looking like humans. They have what's called the magic mouse. It clicks different areas on the screen but never moves. That can only be done using a script. But over time, if they're mitigated, they get much better. Their keystrokes or mouse movements have a lot of entropy. They really want to look human. They'll typically replay a human interaction. In the beginning, they're not very good at spoofing devices, and over time, if and only if they are mitigated, they get better and better at spoofing devices. And what I mean by this is, let's say they're purporting to come from a Samsung phone, but they're not rendering emojis like a Samsung phone. They're not doing floating point math like a Samsung phone. They don't have the right number of cores. They're not the screens. They have to get every attribute right to spoof that device properly. If they get anything wrong, we know they're lying. So we spend a lot of time doing battle with attackers on the right side of this square. When none of this works, along the way, we still see them desperately change their attack infrastructure. They do this all the time. And they've been conditioned to do this. For the last decade, they've been blocked. Even today, many organizations are still blocking by IP or autonomous system or region. The final stage is when they resort to human click farms, where they've got actual humans going through the whatever process. It could be credential stuffing, it could be gift card cracking, it could be account creation, it could be anything. But they'll have thousands of humans doing this because they know they can't automate it, they can't use a bot. And it isn't one or the other. We see a lot of attacks that are hybrid. Like if maybe you have a good bot protection on login, that'll be a human click farm. But then post-authentication, if you don't have bot protection, then they'll automate the rest of it. So this is how we see attackers evolve, all of them. It's very, very predictable. So knowing that helps us to be prepared and deploy the right countermeasure.
Excellent. Thank you very much. So this world is changing faster and faster all the time. I mean, it's getting crazy. I'm a glasses half full type of person. So I'm looking at AI and machine learning language right now, and I'm seeing a lot of hope in terms of leveraging that technology to help us protect our environments. You know, I'm looking at Microsoft Copilot and some of the tools coming up, and those are all interesting to us because it might help us move faster. But I know you have some specific ideas and challenges that you see, especially because of your experience in the underworld, I'll put it this way, while you were in law enforcement. Can you give us a little bit of an overview of what's your thinking around AI, ML, and these newer technologies?
Yeah, I'm not a killer robots in the street person at all. I know the media likes to kind of over-dramatize the threat that AI and ML poses, especially generative AI. I do think it's going to be bad, but I touched on this earlier. I don't think attackers are going to use it unless they have to. It's easier for them just to move on to a softer target and use curl or CentryMBA than it is to start deploying generative AI in their bot attacks. So we're not seeing those sorts of attacks right now. But I am concerned that it's going to make phishing emails a lot more effective. I don't know how many people have interacted with ChatGPT, but it writes very, very well. So we've all been trained to spot typos and grammar and spelling mistakes. Those won't exist in phishing emails anymore. It's also very persuasive. You could ask ChatGPT to write a persuasive argument for point X and then a persuasive argument against point X, and it's good. So it's going to fuel social engineering. And by the way, social engineering already causes a significant amount of victims to lose their life savings, sadly. And oftentimes it's the elderly who are the most vulnerable. And think about it, a bad actor can social engineer. How many people? 30, 40 people in a day, that's a full day, depending upon how long each person's on the phone. But with generative AI, being able to synthesize voices, they could social engineer millions of people. So that's the biggest concern I have is the social engineering, phishing, but we're not really seeing it in bot attacks yet.
Definitely. We're keeping an eye on it. I think that's one thing I'm thinking, in my view, AI and ML, if implemented and leveraged properly, can become a really useful tool. If used without the proper education and awareness, you can really cause a whole lot of problems to your organizations. I'm seeing some difference. I don't know if anybody has used GPT lately, ChatGPT lately. When I first started to use it, when it first came about, I remember asking it to write a reverse shell script just to see what it would do in Python. And it wrote a script that was very efficient. I was looking at it, I'm like, wow, like this is really good. It's quite similar to something I've written a few years ago that I still use from time to time. And all of a sudden, over the past couple of weeks, I asked it to write some scripts and things like that, and it's responding that it won't do it, that it's unethical for it to respond back. So obviously there's some new controls coming into play, and I think that's a good thing. So,
there is the Dan mode that is do anything now in ChatGPT. It's a real thing. I've asked it to write credential stuffing attack tools, and it said no. But then I just asked it to write a tool that programmatically reads from a file usernames and passwords and tries them against a login form at this URL, and it did that.
Yeah.
Or you could just enter do anything now.
That's
Dan
where I give
mode,
up.
and it'll do anything now.
Yes, no, pretty interesting. So indeed, law enforcement, I mean, that's kind of an interesting career, especially when it comes to cybersecurity. Very often we get people here, like Alyssa yesterday, that was absolutely fascinating, that actually talked about her career, essentially hacking into systems and things like that. But I'm going to have to guess that while you were in the FBI, the CIA and such, you must have some pretty interesting stories that have happened.
I do. All right, I'm going to talk about a supply chain intercept operation. This is where I traveled to some remote part of the world, went into a safe house, and in the safe house was a bunch of boxes of computers that were being shipped to a hard target region. We are working with the local government there, what we call a liaison partner, and they took it out of the free trade zone, moved it to the safe house so that I could go in and make changes to the computers and then send them on their way into the hard target region. A very common type of operation that I was involved in. So now's a good time to talk about Jason Bourne. Obviously, a lot of what Jason Bourne does is fake, right? Obviously. But what oftentimes people don't realize is fake is Jason Bourne does everything, all right? He's like a martial arts, a lock defeat, he's a weapons expert. He knows how to defeat alarms. He does everything himself, and that's the part that is unrealistic. In reality, there are teams of dozens of people involved to create that kind of operation. At the top there is a case officer. They're the pointy end of the spear. They're the ones that recruit the assets. The second one, technical operations officer, that was me. The case officer isn't a computer expert. So if he's talking to somebody about accessing computers, he or she will need a computer expert to come in and facilitate that conversation. That was my role. Analyst is somebody who knows the region. This is one of the things that impressed me about CIA. There is like a person sitting in a basement who is an expert on the Horn of Africa. The Horn of Africa. Don't ask him about South Africa. Doesn't know anything about South Africa. But the Horn of Africa, he could tell you the telecommunications infrastructure, the politics, the politicians, the elections, the infrastructure, everything. So all of these ops have an analyst. Lock defeat and alarm defeat, those are different people. They're people who spend years and years learning how to defeat locks. By the way, the first thing they do is check to see if it's unlocked. Right? They do that. To my point is you only bring the level of sophistication necessary to launch a successful attack. Always check to see if it's unlocked. Flaps and seals expert. I'm going to talk about that one in a minute. Document expert. Border crossings, I might need new visas, I might need forged stamps in my passport, I might need anything. The documents folks handle all of that. Disguise and makeup, it's rare. It's very common in Hollywood, but it's rare in real life, but they're very good. Typically retired Hollywood makeup artists consult CIA on how to do really amazing disguises. There might be a dozen or 24 people outside the safe house doing surveillance to let us know that we are in the black and it's safe to continue with our operation. And then finally, a linguist who speaks the local language. Now, let's talk about flaps and seals. This is just some of the tools, but they use chemistry, they use all sorts of specialized tools, and their job is to open packages and then reseal the package in a way that you can't tell it was ever opened. And you think about the operation we're on, I need to get access to all these computers and boxes. And so they need to open each one of those boxes and give it to me, give me the computer, I give it back, and they need to reseal that box so that no one knows the box was tampered with. These look like neurosurgeons, okay? They're like, they have magnification over their eyes, they have specialized tools, things bubbling and gases. It's really amazing watching them work. It takes them hours to open up a box. And then there's packaging inside, and there's packaging inside of that they have to delicately open. Well, the liaison officer got impatient, and he just picked up a box, took a knife, cut into it, ripped it open, started taking stuff out. Cigarette ashes from a cigarette were falling into the box. And he just got impatient. And the flaps and seals expert looked over like, oh my God, what am I going to do with that box? Well, this is, all of the boxes look kind of like the one on the right, except this one. So we had to think, what are we going to do with this box? And he said, nah, don't worry. And he just slapped, inspected by customs, and sent it on its way. We did actually hear from all the computers but one. And I suspect it's the one that was inspected by customs. All right, so that's my CIA anecdote. FBI, I was working out of the Washington field office. One of the first cases I was assigned to was the anthrax investigation. And I need to be very clear. I was not the case agent. Okay, the case agent for a case like this is like an inspector in charge, a 20-year veteran of the FBI. And then there's supervisory special agents, and then 40, 50, 60 agents. I was one of those agents, and I was helping with the digital evidence. But I also helped with searching a pond. I don't know how well you guys remember the anthrax attacks, but they mailed anthrax letters to various people, killed I think 5 or 6. So it was the biggest investigation.
For the very young people, there's a special on Netflix on that, so you know.
Yes. And by the way, it's an investigation the FBI butchered badly. All right, so this is the FBI dive team searching a frozen lake. Okay, this is one of the things that really impressed me about the Bureau is the resources they have. I'm there watching, and they go down into a hole, zero visibility, in a dry suit because it's really, really cold water, and they're just feeling across the bottom of the lake in a grid pattern. Then they drill another hole, and they go down, and they do it again and again and again. Well, they found a glove box in that lake, a very, very valuable piece of evidence. This is what the glove box looked like. This is not the actual glove box, and it didn't have the gloves, okay, because it had been submerged in the water. There were no gloves. But this is what you would use to protect yourself as you were manipulating the envelopes, putting anthrax in them. So when we covered this from the lake, I was telling my wife about it, and she said something kind of funny. She says, wow, the person responsible for the anthrax investigations, they must have really practiced good OPSEC. I mean, they did all this underwater? And I said, no, I don't think that's how it happened. And she thought about it. Oh, yeah, okay, I figured it out. She hates that I still tell that story. All right, so because they found this piece of evidence, they thought, okay, this is a gold mine of evidence. We've got to search even better and search more. And they realized that, zero visibility, feeling the bottom of the lake is not a thorough search. So they drained the lake. I mean, think about how many law enforcement organizations have the resources to drain the lake. So they did. They drained it and put it all in a lake that was nearby, did a very comprehensive search, unfortunately found nothing else. Didn't need to drain the lake, but they drained it nonetheless, and it's always kind of impressed me about the resources that FBI will bring about an investigation, even one they butchered.
Wow. That's a lot of people and a lot of straws. Anyway, so actually maybe in closing, I know you have a little bit of a story here that involves Elon Musk and yourself.
Yeah, so I'm not on social media. I'm not on any of it, never appealed to me. But when Elon was expressing interest in buying Twitter, I said, okay, I'm going to create a Twitter account. And so I created a Twitter account in a fake name. And the first thing I noticed was this obsession with number of followers. Everybody wants more followers. And I was shocked. It's like the more followers you have, the more important what it is you have to say is perceived to be. I don't know. But everybody wants more followers. Then I found a lot of third parties who will provide you with followers. You just pay for them. So I created my fake account, and I paid less than $1,000 US. and my fake account had over 100,000 followers, all fake. And these are created using bots and fake accounts to serve this demand for followers. Here's my fake account. You see I have over 100,000 followers, and look at the quality of the followers. They're obviously fake. They're the same picture, right? So these were allowed to persist on Twitter for a long time. And I was shocked that this is easy stuff to stop, and they weren't stopping it. So I also wrote a script. I'm not a programmer, but I wrote it in a weekend just by watching, YouTube videos and using resources online. So I wrote a script that automatically creates accounts on Twitter, fake accounts. It's just a bot. I wrote a bot. And I wanted to see what countermeasure I would encounter. And I didn't. I didn't encounter a countermeasure. So then I made my bot really stupid. I did the magic mouse. I typed lightning fast. I came from the same IP address. And finally, I encountered this. And you've already seen how easy it is to defeat all forms of CAPTCHA. And this is what Twitter was doing to try and stop bots. All I needed to do was come from a different IP address, and this went away. I didn't even need to use 2CAPTCHA to solve this. So they have no effective countermeasure. Also, Twitter has a reverse incentive, right? They don't really want to know how many fake accounts they have because of daily active users. They play a role in their valuation. The more users they have, the more money their company is worth. You can't be the guy saying, give me 10 data scientists and $1 million in funding, and I'm going to prove that 80% of our accounts are fake. You're not going to get that funding. They have a reverse incentive. They don't want to know how many bots there are. Here's a social engineering site, a social networking site. Everything in yellow are bots. These are successful logins, not a credential stuffing attack. These are bots controlling the accounts they created. 93%. And depending on how you bucket, it's as high as 99%. So we see this across social networking sites. Here's a create account attack. You have to really zoom in. 70,000 an hour of the humans, 30 million per hour are bots. Think about that. Coming in one day and finding you have an extra billion accounts. So I asserted that 80% of Twitter accounts are likely fake. That's what I asserted, and it got lots of media attention, typically abroad. The US media wasn't interested in doing anything that would help Elon Musk at all. But there are the reasons why I considered it. We wrote a blog, and by the way, the question is, who cares about fake followers, right? Who cares if somebody has fake followers? I don't care. But that whole ecosystem can be abused by state actors. Okay, they can create millions of fake. Think about the influence you could have over public opinion. You could bury truths, amplify lies if you had programmatic control over millions of social media accounts. So it's that ecosystem that is exploited. That's the concern I have. So we wrote a blog where I stated that 8 in 10 are likely fake. That got picked up by The Australian. I did an interview in Australia with The Australian, and then that got picked up by Elon Musk. And he actually tweeted my picture, which isn't part of the article. So someone on his team got the article, then sought out a picture of me on the web, which isn't hard to find, even though I'm not on social media. You just do Dan Woods F5, and you get lots of pictures. And he tweeted, and I didn't know that he did this until my phone just exploded, and complete strangers were asking to take pictures with me. That had never happened before. But since then, now I have 11,000 followers. Look how real they look, right? So what Elon did is he got all the low-hanging fruit. He got rid of Q. He got rid of that one. But he still has a little ways to go. And now when I do an interview with U.S. media, I say, look, Elon's done a great job getting bots down, but he still has some work to do. The quote they put is that Dan Woods says that Twitter still has a huge bot problem. Well, it's not quite what I said, but they do not want to say anything nice about Elon Musk.
That was great. Thank you very much, actually, for joining us today. So I'm going to turn around. We have 5 minutes for questions, and I figured this would be a good opportunity for people. I see somebody in the back there.
No, they went after the wrong guy. Yeah, tormented the guy, the wrong guy. And the guy who ultimately was responsible killed himself.
Anybody else for questions?
After all that, yes, sir.
Oh, yeah.
You talked about AI.
I was asked to speak on a panel on quantum computing, and I said, I'm not your guy. You know, I'm an ex-cop FBI agent. I'm not a quantum computing expert, so I'm sorry I don't have an answer to your question. Maybe you do.
Well, I was just going to mention, it's kind of an anecdote from my side, but 4 years ago I was interviewed by a magazine in the United States. The interview came out and I was talking about Mandiant and things like that in a good light. And Kevin Mandia actually contacted me and we ended up chatting on the phone. And I asked Kevin Mandia, I said, you know, one of the biggest worries I have right now is the risk to our encryption systems. I mean, everything we do right now to protect ourselves with encryption and quantum computing. So, you know, am I too worried? Like, what's going on? And Kevin Mandia told me, oh, Martin, by the time quantum becomes a reality, we'll both be retired, so you don't have to worry about it. Well, the first thing I thought of is that, number one, he's got millions, so maybe he'll be retired. I know I'm not. I work for the government. But anyway, that being said, it told me that. It made me feel a little bit better. And all of a sudden, I think it was in fall of 2021 that I was reading an article about a university in China that started to sell Cycle on their quantum computer, where they're doing complex mathematics problem, including potential for cryptology, decrypting some files and such. And it made me realize that I think Kevin was wrong. I don't know, maybe not. But anyway, it's going to take a while before it becomes a real problem. Of course, they still have to find a way to connect those computers to the internet. There's different technologies that are being investigated right now. But I think it's becoming very important for all of us. As a matter of fact, this is one project we're going to start with Cyber Alberta. So I'm mentioning that right now. We looked at NIST recently published a document which was also sponsored by CISA in the United States to get ready for quantum computing. Start inventorying your encryption mechanism, where you use them, which ones you use, which version and such, your plans to evolve that technology so that you're ready to start acting on that threat when it materializes itself, because who knows when it's going to be. I think it's going to be sooner than we expected. Let's just put it this way.
And I have read reports that many organizations, criminal organizations, state organizations, have been collecting copious amounts of encrypted data for over a decade. They can't do anything with it now, but they're collecting it knowing that at some point they're going to be able to decrypt it. So once they are able to decrypt it, you have to consider it isn't just your data going forward that is at risk, it is your historical data as well.
Exactly, that is absolutely right. So, any other questions? Oh, one at the back there.
Yeah, we early days we were tracking bot groups and their levels of sophistication and naming them, but it just got unwieldy. I mean, there are millions, just millions. So we just stopped naming them, and we even stopped trying to track the actors. Now we focused on the objective of the attacker and their level of sophistication. So in fact, I should bring this up because a lot of people think it's just a login. Virtually every public-facing login is under bot attack. Sometimes it's good automation, but it has a harmful effect. It's like an online travel agent. That is good automation. Airlines, hotels, they like that automation, but it can also freeze their entire inventory if it's not done properly. So the key is having visibility and control over all automation, not just malicious automation. But yeah, the level of sophistication is really what we're tracking, and the superpower are the ones that look extremely human and spoof devices extremely well.
We'll take one last question because I know I can hear stomach growlings right now. So, but right there at the back.
I'm sorry.
Robert Mueller.
Oh, I've met Robert Mueller a few times. I wasn't impressed.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Dan. Obviously, I mean, we still have a pretty full room, and it's the lunch is already served. So I'm going to let people go here. We'll see you back at 1 o'clock this afternoon, of course, with the next presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.